Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and I am cosplaying as Eno this evening because I got a latte from work, and I also wanted to be very minimal and low-key. I promise I have a fun cosplay for next week planned, but this week we're going low-key, and I feel like I'm going to need to go low-key because Shibuya's already here, baby! What? It's episode 8 of Season 2, Jujutsu Kaisen. Around this time in Season 1, Episode 8 was kind of a turning point too, because it was around the time we were meeting Mahito, meeting Junpei, and getting Nanami into the story. So I feel like around this point in Season 1 we were having a turning point too, but that turning point wasn't nearly filled with as much dread as this one is. Yes, indeed. But yeah, I'm pretty excited tonight. I'm excited to see what all this episode has in store for us. I'm hoping that we backtrack a little bit to before the end of last episode, where we kind of get some feelers of what was happening beforehand. That'd be great. But yeah, I want to go over some comments before we start all this, because y'all had lots of things to say. I was like, yes, please. We'll talk about them as we go. Alessia Colley noted that Miwa had used the simple domain back in the exchange event back in Season 1. And I went back and looked at the discussion today from last episode, and I did talk about that in the discussion. So yes, she did use it before. It's really cool that Muda drew inspiration or connected that they both were able to use simple domains. Fun. So Miwa being a Gojo fangirl, could she actually destroy Gojo? No, I think it's more complicated than that. But Math said that Eno had requested Nanami recommend him for grade 1, but they're both now on the mission with him. So there's a little bit of discussion. Anime Annie was talking about how you can't be on the selection committee. Basically, you can recommend somebody for grade 1. You can go on missions with them, but you can't be their supervising officer. It's sort of like if you're in grad school and a thesis chair recommends you for getting your master's or doctorate, and then they can't be on the deciding panel who gives you that doctorate or master's. That all makes sense. I get that now. But yeah. Seppi talked about how in the first OP, it was all blue and happy, and someone shared there was a TikTok that was like, that it perfectly syncs up with It's Raining Men. I'm like, oh my God, it's so great. And then happy, and it's blue and happy. And then the second OP, though, takes, instead of the blue coloring, it's red, and it's much more dark and destructive, which I thought was really good. Which the first OP was a little bit destructive too. They burst through a skyscraper, but it's all played off for laughs. And then I like Seppi was quoting Plato, was talking about Plato. I'm like, dude, my master's degree is in rhetoric and composition. I talked about Plato and Socrates at that time. It's been a while since I've had to do it for an assignment, but yeah, we went over all the Greek rhetoricians. But I loved the conversation about Plato and the idea of red being a color. We talked about color theory in grad school, about red being for passion and the irrational part of the soul. Yes, going back to Plato. And I love that conversation and the connection Seppi makes, where you have Yuuji, who is a separation of his soul, is Sukuna, and then you have how Mahito is kind of like this basic urge of, it's like passion embodied, and it can tamper the soul and alter it. So I liked that. You had Yuuji separated with this irrational soul inside of him. It's very nice. I would like to say that Gege probably has looked at Plato or Socrates in his time. He seems more like a Plato person, though, than a Socrates person, if I had to guess. But yeah, thank you, Seppi, for that comment. Jake Collins pointed out that Muda's pact was basically he would have bodily limitations in exchange for an abundance of cursed energy. It's like the polar opposite of Toji. Toji had no cursed energy, but an abundance of physical prowess, whereas Muda is the exact opposite, which is good to know. Tamia said that Evening Festival, the title refers to a ritual or festival before the main event. And I was like, oh, I read that and went, well, here we are, the Shibuya Incident, so that makes perfect sense. Nice. And that usually the festival involves a Shinto shrine. Yeah, I was gonna say, this OP definitely feels, in comparison to the last, it feels very much more spiritual, which is really interesting, because the first or the second OP in Season 1 had to do with like a more Western style funeral, and this seems more like Japanese spiritual things like that. James Liggins, 891, says that Toge is actually a second grade in the Jujutsu Kaisen movie. Good to know. Thank you for that. Morgan Newman. Morgan Newman, there are several people, I have moderators on my channel that go through, thank the Lord for Floor, who goes through and checks all the Jujutsu Kaisen comments, and they will tell me, they'll be like, no, this comment is talking about the manga, which I don't want to know about. Or they'll say, oh, no, this comment is explaining something that's not going to get explained till later. And I'm like, good, not going to bother reading it. But there were a lot of comments this last week that the moderators were like, no, they're trying to explain to you something in the manga that's not been explained yet. And my thing is, just be patient, because if the anime points out something and it's not been explained yet, I am assuming they are eventually going to explain it. And it probably will be, right? And Morgan Newman basically was the only one I could read with this comment that said, all they said was that special grade number 1 is basically just grade 1 with special circumstances. That's all I needed to know. I was like, okay, cool. That's enough. So the guy from the Zenin clan that's with Maki and Nobara is not actually a special grade. He's just like a special circumstance grade 1. Probably because he's nobility. Go figure. So that's all I needed to know. Everything else will probably be explained, and I look forward to being surprised. So thank you, Morgan Newman. And also, I talked in the discussion about how the nail was probably used to nail down the veil, and then they confirmed that it did happen in the exchange event in season 1. Thank you. And then finally, Anime Annie had some comments, of course. Anime Annie noted about Toto and Mei being like they could accompany Yuuji, they just can't be their supervising officers to get them nominated and selected to be grade 1, which makes sense. Kusakabe was in the Jujutsu Kaisen movie. I remember him now. He looks a lot like Kong. His voice actor is the same one for Urahara from Bleach, which I love, and Kagetora from Kuroko's Basketball, which is a fun time, right? And then Panda's evaluation has apparently been postponed, which I do think is interesting. And he's like, that's kind of weird. And I'm like, me too. I think it's sad that poor Panda, it's speciesist that his evaluation has been postponed, but yet we're having Yuuji and Megumi and Nobara's accelerated. I wonder if Yagi has anything to do with that. If Yagi's like, I don't want Panda going on dangerous missions, and maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. We'll have to see. But then Hikari is a skyscraper at Shibuya Station. It has lots of office spaces. I'm sure it won't be destroyed in any sense or capacity. It won't become collateral damage at all, I'm sure. And then there was talk about that the Star Religious Group was established in the Nara era. We had that established back in the first few episodes of this season. But then what's interesting is that Anime Annie points out that the Heian era occurred in the era right after it, which is timeline-wise rather interesting. And apparently, around the time the Simple Domain was constructed, it's interesting that Gege is drawing on this because the Heian era was a peaceful time in Japan, right? So you would think it's kind of ironic that you have these high-powered curse spirits, but Anime Annie pointed out that it could be a cool way that Gege is commenting that, yes, it was technically a peaceful period in Japan, but Akutami could be making a nod to how that peaceful era led to rampant poverty for the majority of the citizens because the nobility were incompetent rulers, which is in no way, shape, or form reflective of Jujutsu society now, right? No way, shape, or form reflective of that. And that the military class rose in society, along with national culture being at the forefront more than the Chinese influence that had happened in the era before. Gee, this story is in no way reflective of that history at all. I'm like, Gege, what we saying? Which is fun. I like anytime an author can take something historical and add like a fantasy or fictional twist to it. I find that fascinating, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, those are my comments. I'm excited. I got under 10 minutes, so mission accomplished. I want to give a special shout out over to our tier of philanthropy patrons over on Patreon. I am super thankful for Floor being our moderator. I am super thankful for all the people on YouTube and all the people on Patreon who support me in what I do, which I love talking about Jujutsu Kaisen. I've been so excited for years to talk about this with y'all again. It's been so much fun so far, and we're only on episode 8. Can you imagine? So I want to give a special shout out and thanks to the philanthropy tier patrons over on Patreon, to Edgar, to Dana, to Alex Cornejo, to Kiri, to Be Happy, our fellow Toji enthusiast on the Discord, as well as Shimayama, Kiri, Nameless Monster, Argent, Matthew, Palfinier, Ashy Gots No Bitches, as well as Tyrone, Anime Annie, Eric, Sunspots, Translucent Men, Anna, Legatus, and Goob. Thank you all so much for all of your support. I deeply appreciate it. all of my love. So I've got my little cursed spirits dogs beside me. I'm hoping that they'll go lay down and be good. Huckleberry's like, are you kidding me? But yeah, I'm really excited, y'all. I hope y'all are too. We're going to get this episode pulled up here on the old streaming platform. Get it ready. Make sure that, of course, my subtitles, I've got to double check on all this and make sure my subtitles are on and the volume is on. The volume's not, and I'm going to guess my subtitles were off too. No, they were actually on. All right, we're great. So we're going to sit here and start episode 8 of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, y'all. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and go down, Huckleberry. God. And let's do this. That was the shortest 23 minutes I think we've had in this series. What? That was so quick. Where did the episode go? It was over. It was like that. It was done. This episode being called the Shibuya Incident, there's going to be like 10 parts to this, isn't there? I feel like we had a lot of parts to one of the arcs in the last season. Like there was like part 6 or something, right? I feel like, no, the exchange event, the special exchange event, there was like 8 parts of that, right? So I feel like this is going to be the exact same way. It's going to be like the Shibuya Incident part 9 or something when it ends. And well, if it's episode 8, we have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I mean, I think that honestly, the rest of this mini arc, the rest of this core is going to be the Shibuya Incident. I am positive. So, I want to go through this episode because there's lots of little things I wanted to point out and everything. There was some really good action. The animation, I think, lends itself to this style, and little things I tried to say in the reaction, but I want to expand upon in the discussion. But Gojo, we got a lot of things to talk about with Gojo and this ghetto. What's so fascinating about this is that it does feel like I don't know what it is. I want to talk about Ghetto and what I think is going on with him. I feel so proud of myself. I said Choso and I didn't have to look at my special note that I made myself that's sitting on my computer that says JJK Choso in big letters with my haiku post-it. Yeah, I was like, I started this last episode. I had so much trouble. I kept calling him like Churro and Cholo and everything, and everybody was like, no. And so I told the Discord, I'm like, I'm gonna make myself a note. It says Choso on it. I'm gonna put it here. And I'm sad that I've gotten his name wrong because I really like Choso's character. We're gonna talk about him. And he's probably my favorite curse out of all the curses. I like Choso. Not only because of his character design, but because we're gonna talk about him, right? He looks like he's in a constant state of dread. And I feel like all of us can relate to Choso somehow, where we're in a constant state of panic. That seems like Choso. I love his character. We're going to talk about him in this episode because he's kind of interesting. But okay, there's lots of things to talk about. We didn't get to see Ino in this episode or Nanami or any of this. Instead, we focused on, I was so excited, Mei Mei with Yuuji and Yui. Their parents in their infinite nomenclature creativity, Mei Mei and Yui. They have a cousin named Ora. Oya. I'm gonna stop. So let's go through this episode, shall we? Let's start on this. I will point out in the very, very first panel, we see a guy with the little mouse ears. We see somebody dressed up in the kimono, and we see like a cat person pumpkin. There's somebody with a pink baseball cap and purple overalls with their back turned to us, audience, their hair down. It looks like Urahime. So it would be kind of funny, but of course, the fact of the matter is that only non-sorcerers can be in the lowest level. So Urahime, it is not, but it does look like Urahime. I kept wanting to play like, we actually see Where's Waldo at some point. I wanted to play Where's Waldo, and we didn't get it, which was very sad. But it's like, you just want to go through all these things. Like, you have somebody that looks like an elf. You have a witch there. Although, and then there's that too. The witch with the witch's hat almost seems like it could be Momo. But you know that there can't be non-sorcerers down there. So it's so fascinating that you kind of get faked out thinking that there maybe are some sorcerers amongst the crowd. But that can't be, right? And then you have like the zombie nurse, you have the robot, everybody's standing up there, you have like a Harlequin thing, and then there's Gojo. And it's it's 2038. So yeah, so last episode we got to like 8:41. This is all happening around the same time. The latest we get in this episode is like 9 o'clock or somewhere in there. So there's all the stuff happening around the same time with the series, which I'm sure at some point this is all going to come to a head. And at some point, I'm going to have to ask the Discord to be like, I need a timeline. But we'll wait on that, right? We'll wait on that. We'll eventually have to make a timeline out of everything. But that's not right now. So we're fine. But yeah, this is all happening around the same thing. So we have B3. Okay. So all this happening on B3. We've got different things going on. We need to write this down, the levels that we have. So this is all happening around the same 2-hour period, right? But Ghetto said that he needed like a 30-minute, we might go back and change this, time frame to create this prison realm, to activate this prison realm. I mean, that in itself sounds pretty self-explanatory, like, oh, we're going to imprison Gojo. So in the prison realm, whatever that amounts to, we'll see about that. My thing is, I wonder if it requires a large sacrifice of souls, and it would require a large sacrifice of human souls, and they've lured all these people here. I mean, they've lured them there for obvious reasons, which we'll talk about as, you know, collateral and liabilities to try to, like, distract Gojo. But the thing about it is the idea that could it be a sacrifice as well, that we have to sacrifice all these human souls to open up the prison realm. That's a very distinct possibility. Could be why it's not been opened up before, because so far, you know, we've not had this opportunity, so whatever. But we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But there is the idea that we have B1, which is the surface level, which is, or basement 1. We have that. And then we have B2. We're going to just put some different things on here. B3 is where Gojo is. Gojo and the crowd. And we also have a Jogo. Old Jogo's back. I missed him. Look at him. Old Jogo. Hanami is here. Hanami is there. And then we also have Choso. So we have all them. And then we're going to talk about B4 and B5. And B5 seems to be where the hostages slash Mahito is at. Yuuji and Mei Mei are at Mei Mei and Yui. Oh my God, Yui. They are on B4. So, or at least that's where they're going down to. We'll probably edit this as we go, right? But yeah, this is the tower that Annie was talking about in the comments where Gojo is at. And we have this. And Gojo's like, well, this is awful. This is a bad thing. There's a veil under here that's trapping the non-sorcerers inside. So he's like, Gojo's like, I like that Gojo's trying to figure out the situation. Like, okay, what do I do? How do we handle this? Where are the veils at? What's going on? Trying to unravel everything, right? And I love the idea. There's also, oh my God, there is, when Gojo sets his foot down like he's going to step over the crowd, there's somebody with a hat that's Law from One Piece. That's so funny. Gege, look at you. Look at you giving references. How hilarious. But yeah, I love that Gojo just stomps on people. And she saw him. Like, again, so we're seeing the idea that people can notice him. They're seeing him there. He's a Jujutsu sorcerer, so of course they're seeing him. He's not like as a cursed spirit. But I love the idea of them all looking up at Gojo. It seems a bit symbolic that you have all of these non-sorcerers looking up at Gojo, like noticing that he's there. Which is so weird, because if you compare that to whenever Gojo was carrying Riko out of the room where they're all clapping, it's like they were all noticing Gojo too and revering him as well. So it's this weird state. Gojo just carries with him this weird state of like awe and reverence with people, where they just look at him and they instantly are like, either like, oh my God, Gojo, or they're like, who is he? Like they're just in a state of bewilderment whenever they see him. And it's very, very interesting, right? But this little long-legged Slender Man, he just hops around. You see Jason Kruger there. There's a Spike from Cowboy Bebop. I love all the costumes. Like, it's just like a little, you could play a whole game picking out costumes from the crowd, which is really funny. And then there's the train tracks of the station where he's like, He's like, fine, I have a good idea of what they're after, which is you. And he's like, well, then fine, I'll play along. He's like, fine, be this way. So then we have a cemetery. The Aoyama Cemetery is where Yuuji and Yui and Mei Mei meet. Which is so creepy. I love just the idea of the funeral procession from the OP, the cemetery. And then Yuuji asks this big question. He's like, they're making him do it alone? I understand the logic, but there has to be something we can do too. I freaking love Yuuji. Can we not say that enough? Can we not say it enough? I'm going to put Yuuji over here in pink because that's his color, right? Real sorcerers wear pink. What I love about it is that Yuuji is treating Gojo like a person. Again, we call back to the flashbacks where Nanami was like, well, just let Gojo handle it. And that's kind of been the mentality of a lot of the Jujutsu sorcerers and a lot of Jujutsu society. And Geto was one of the ones that was like, I don't like that idea. We talked about this in the flashback episodes. I feel like Geto and Yuuji would get along really well because they both treat people like people. Well, Geto did until, he had his breaking point. But Yuji's like, Gojo's a person. Like, there has to be some way that we can help. And that's such his personality. It's something I love about Yuuji, that he's like, we don't need to let Gojo do this by himself. There has to be some way, shape, or form in which we can assist him. And I'm like, yes, Yuuji, look at you. God, Yui. I thought it was Inumaki, which I'm glad none of y'all spoiled me. Carrying around this giant battle axe. I'm like, oh my God, yes. He's like, be his backup or something. And then Yui gives him the axe. I love that Yui is just like, here, hold this, please. Also, Yui 1 has, it's like Mei Mei has the hair going in front of her face. And it's like Yui had it started and then he chopped it off. And so it just like, wing, it does like a little alfalfa swing. He's got this little jujitsu sorcerer. Like, I feel like he's going to be in... I'm so curious about Mei Mei's backstory now. I want to know all the things about Mei Mei. I'm like, is she from a noble family? Are they like noble sorcerers? I don't want you all to tell me. I want to find out. But I just love Yui. And I love that his eyes are green and her eyes are purple. My favorite colors. I'm like, God, yes. This is so freaking cute. And he puts like the little, I love Yui, he puts the towel down that she could sit on the grave. I'm like, she's so cool. She's like if Wednesday Addams and Pugsley were like pish prosh. Let me get this right. She's like if Wednesday Addams and her brother Pugsley were proper posh siblings. It's what I imagine them like. I'm like, yes, please. She's like, we're heading to Shibuya now. So they originally met up outside of Shibuya. They met up like way away and then made their way there. So I'm guessing she had to meet up with her little brother and get the axe. And he's like, oh, we are. And then he goes, gets it. He's like, give it back. I love that Yuji's like, what the hell, kid? You just gave me this axe. And you're like, give it back. Like, look, you little rude little shit. Like, oh my God, I love it. And then he just hands it to his sister. Like, my sister, my brother would never act like this at all. He's like forcing my sister to be his backup. Gojo Satoru must think he's some big shot. Oh my God. And she's like, you shouldn't treat him like some ordinary guy. I also want to make note that I have watched Black Butler in the past, and the little, like, I've read Black Butler up to a certain point, where basically the anime left off at. And there's like little gravestone markers behind the two of them. And the way that Mei Mei and Yui look with the gravestone markers, they could totally be related to the Undertaker in Black Butler. I'm just saying. But she's like, don't treat him like some ordinary guy. You're not like an ordinary woman yourself, Nisama. I like that Yuji's like, I'm some ordinary guy, which is not true at all, but it's just, God, the humor. I'm glad we've had humor sprinkled throughout these episodes so far. It's needed, and I was afraid that once we got to Shibuya, there would be no more humor. No, there is humor. It's freaking morbid, but it's humor, and I'll take it. I'll take whatever we can get. He's like, oh, Yui, you are truly adorable. There you go saying stuff you don't believe again. I'm like, okay, so do Yui and Mei Mei actually hate each other, and they're just putting on this show of being like the doting siblings when they really are like at each other's throats? What? So Mei Mei, grade 1, and Yuji is promotion evaluation postponed. Oh, okay, so it says his evaluation is postponed. they're just waiting till after the Shibuya incident. Sure. And then Yui is just there. So yeah, maybe they don't like each other, because why would you bring your little baby brother into the most dangerous possible situation unless you were just like, come on, little bro, can you handle it? Yes, sister, I can handle it. Maybe they are like Pugsley and Wednesday Addams. Maybe. What you love isn't family, but work relations treated as family relations, right? What? Like, absolutely ridiculous. And Yuji's like, what is happening? I love that Yuji's like, I'm an only child. I don't know how this goes. What? Absolutely hilarious. I love the dynamic between Mei Mei and Yui. I just love, it just feels like straight up out of the manga that Yuji's like, let's get out of here. Can we go? Oh my God. And then Mei Mei's like, oh, okay, we've got to go. There's Itadori-kun, there's a change in destination. Another veil like the one over Shibuya was lowered at the shrine station. We're heading to that one. Ah, okay. She's like, we're running. You better keep up. And Yuji's like, okay. Yuji's like, great. We're done with the creepy sibling gag. Let's go. So she'll show us a map here in a little bit. But basically, they are not at Shibuya. They're at this other station. Meanwhile, Gojo and Choso and them are at Shibuya. Okay, and Mahito and them are at the Meiji, the station there. So that is both comforting and concerning at the same time. It is comforting in the fact of knowing that Yuji is not at Shibuya, where this stuff is going down and he could potentially be in danger. But it's also concerning because him and Gojo are not at the same location. And so if Yuji... I don't want Yuji to get to the point where he blames himself for not being there. I'm wondering if it's a distraction. Yeah, I feel like Mahito being at the station at one side and Gojo being at the other side, I feel like Mahito is luring Yuji away to try to get... I feel like if anybody could put a damper on Geto's plans, it's Yuji, because Yuji is the wild card. Yuji is the one that has Sukuna in him that Mahito knows from experience. Sukuna is very powerful and could be a problem. So I feel like Geto told Mahito, look, you want revenge on Sukuna for beating you up last time? Cool. I'm going to have you distract Yuji, get him away from Shibuya while we take care of business. And then afterwards, once Gojo's gone, we'll all team up together and kill Yuji and take Sukuna. That's what I think is going to happen with that. But I don't know. So there's that question of what's going to go down. And so then, yeah, Gojo's like, fine, you guys are prepared for all this, whatever. You guys all came. Looky who it is. Now, there's somebody else in the OP, like a little short monster thing that's in the OP, unless that is Jogo too. But they're not present in there. There's Hanami and Jogo. And then Choso. Choso just doesn't look like he wants to be there. Choso's just like, do I have to? You won't have any excuses when you lose this time. Yeah, Choso looks like he hasn't slept in 17,000 years. And he just has like, just all of the bags in his eyes. And he's just like, I do love his little pigtails though. His character design is so funky, but I love it. And then Hanami's not saying a word. And then Jogo, of course, is like, have you given thought on the first excuse you'll use when you lose? Jogo is so cocky, and it's just ridiculous. The Shibuya incident. So the OP, right? I wanted to go through this OP real quick and talk about it. So it makes sense, Jogo and all them being there. I wanted to go through a couple things real quick. There's one thing I wanted to look at. So we see everybody. We can see the Zenin man now standing there, right? We see Yui, we see Panda, we see Kusakabe, we see Gojo, and then we see, yeah, Mahito going through. Mahito went through the subway earlier. He wasn't in the train, but he walked beside it. That makes me think maybe he's going to lure all the people to the subway and transfigure all of them. Did he do that before? Creepy. Very creepy. Okay, yeah, there is, when walking here, there's something there. There is Hanami, there's Jogo, there's Geto, there's Choso, and there's something under a sheet. Something under a sheet! Well, that sucks! No! No! What's under the sheet? No! I don't like this. I don't like this. And there's that weird box with the eye on it. Nah, not feeling it. We can totally leave now. That's fine. We don't have to do any of that. And then there's all the fingers. Now, in the flame, they showed Jogo there. And when they went over, they showed Hanami. And then it looked like Mahito with the multiple hands, like the embodiment of self-perfection. Right? Interesting. Okay. So we basically cut back to Mei Mei and them talking about what they're doing. I feel like this episode intentionally only focuses on Mei Mei and Yuuji to make us forget about where other characters are located at. But I'm fairly confident that the episode will bring it back to where they are. So it's just going to be a lot of... I feel like I'm going to have to go back when we get everybody together and the pieces. Right now, we're just setting all the pieces on the board for the Shibuya incident. I feel like once they start moving in tandem, I'm going to have to go back to this episode and the one before it and map out where everybody is. But we'll wait till next week to do that. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. But so we have the platform. There's a veil to keep ordinary people trapped inside and covering the entire subway station. And within that, there's another veil around the platform on level B5 that prevents sorcerers from entering. So you basically have this situation where you have everyone is trapped in here. And in here, it's literally everyone. And then the non and sorcerers are all in here. So yeah, that's problematic because it's like you're trapping your bait, but your bait can't be rescued. So that's the problem. They're trapping the bait in B5, but they're trapping all the bait in B5 and they're not letting any sorcerers in, but the people can't get out. So it's just like, we can use this bait however we want to, and you can't stop it. It's Meiji Shrine. There we go. Exit 2. The cursed spirit or cursed user who lowered the veils is somewhere between these two veils. Yep. Okay. Between them. Yes. Not on the platform they're centered around. And they're like, we believe that they're most likely taking on the risk of being outside as well to strengthen the barrier. I love that all of them have like the suits on, like all of the people working for the Jujutsu Society, they all have the suits. 2 of our assistant supervisors have been taken out already, which is very sad. And between these barriers, and like the girl doesn't want to talk about it. She's like, I don't want to say for certain because it's going to trigger the pink-haired guy standing next to me, but... And Mei Mei's like, go ahead and say it. Like, we're ready for it. Just spit it out already. And she says, well, I'm just saying that there are transfigured humans between the barriers. And we see, like, all the stuff messed up, like Mahito's been there. And that's, like, that has pushed Yuuji's button. He's like, oh, Mahito's here. Okay. Like, Mahito is like, one thing I love about Yuuji, he's a total sweetheart, but he takes his villains... He takes his enemies seriously. He does not underestimate them at any point. And I like that he's very open and honest about that communication. Like, he tells Mei Mei, he's like, oh, I'm surprised you beat that grasshopper, that locust cursed spirit. And he's like, yeah, only because it was that and not Mahito. Mahito would have been a lot harder. I agree. I'm glad that Yuuji is acknowledging that. That's important, that he knows his enemies and their strength, right? I also love Mei Mei's ability. I want to know everything about Mei Mei. I want to know her background. I want to watch like a whole spin-off series of her. She's so freaking cool. And she gets to control like the crows and everything. It's great. I also like the idea that we now know why she has the hair in front of her eyes. She puts the hair in front of her eyes and it helps her concentrate because then she can like focus on the animals and not see in front of her. It's also kind of like Gojo where you can't quite see what expression she's making or where her attention is. So it's like a shield for her, which I love. It's on both sides. You can't quite tell. And her outfit is very symmetrical on both sides. So it almost feels like you don't know if you're looking at her front or her back when she's facing you. It's very clever. And like her brother's just sitting there like, and Yuuji's like, we have to hurry. Now that's the thing. Yuuji does for a hot second get impatient and he's like, oh, we've got to go face Mahito's down there, he's hurting people, we got to go. And Mei Mei and Yui make him stop. And I feel like they're the perfect people to be with Yuuji because Yuji's so damn polite that even when he's in a hurry, even when he's rushing, he's like, can we please go downstairs? And they're like, wait. And he's like, okay. I love how polite quiet Yuuji is. He's just like, I'm fine. It's great. It's absolutely great. I love it. Nii-sama is sharing the crow's perception. It's a process, takes concentration, so be quiet. And Yuji's like, fine. And she's like, it's okay if you talk. And I love Yuji's like, she says it's fine. I love the banter that Yuuji has with both of them. It's so innocent and cute. And Yui is like, Nii-sama, I was trying to help you. Adorable. But then, yeah, the crows get killed. She's like, okay. So she's like, I figured out what's going on. She's like, Itadori, which would you prefer? Killing lots of the weak transfigured humans or going after the main one? And obviously the answer is going after the main one, right? So I like that Mei Mei's like, I have no problem facing the transfigured humans, but you do. So we need to lead you straight to the point of finding whatever is here. So yeah, okay. So we have the different platforms. Obviously Gojo's on 1. They're on 4, right? They're at 2 right now. They're like, we need to go. They're like the attacking, they're normal people here. They go through everything of how they need to go to, where they need to go. I want to get where she describes where they're going to. So they're on B2. So they could go to where Gojo's at, but instead they choose to go down to where Mahito is. Again, separating them, dividing them, making it to where they're not going to be able to stop Geto with whatever they're planning on doing with this prison realm, right? And Mei Mei is like, all we got to do is we need to go after whatever's isolating the people on B5. And Yuji's like, he's here though, right? Like, he's below us, right? That curse. I like that Yuuji does not want to give it a name. We'll talk about that because Yuuji he doesn't want to sympathize with Mahito, right? He calls Mahito that curse. That curse. Now, the patch face is what Mei Mei calls it and what they end up calling it. And then he finds out. So Yuuji wasn't sure about Mahito's name until the curse mentions it. And he's like, I can't focus on that right now. Because Yuuji is such an empath that he will maybe possibly start to empathize with Mahito. And that's the last thing he wants to do because he realized how dangerous Mahito is. So I just loved that little tiny detail about Yuji's character to separate himself from his humanity, to separate him from empathizing with Mahito at all. He has to separate himself and just say that curse and not call him by name. That's so fascinating. And then I like that Mei Mei is like, yeah, we couldn't confirm that it was him, but the fact that there's transfigured humans here means it's probably likely. She's like, I don't really know about dividing up our forces, but if we waste time, all the common people are going to be wiped out. So here's what we're going to do. I like that she's like, the 2 of us will take exit 7 directly to B4 to rescue the civilians. Yep, they're going to go up there and go to B4 to rescue all the civilians there. And if it gets dangerous, you head down there as well. Okay. I like that Yui just grabs her axe and goes. She's like, and I like Mei Mei's like, I want to be greedy and try to save everybody and make sure and get all the things that I want. Again, I'm amazed that Mei Mei trusts her little brother coming with her unless he has some crazy curse technique that we don't know about. We don't see him with her until she like destroys the curse, so there's no telling. And we'll know what our opponents in B5 are after. And he's like, don't worry, I won't lose anymore. And that goes back to episode 12 of season 1 where Yuuji was like, I lost Junpei, I'm not going to lose anymore. That doesn't bode well. Anytime a character says, I'm not going to lose again, I'm like, bold words for a shonen protagonist. So he's on B2. Okay, that's where he's at. So he's not even down. So Yuuji and them, they end up near B4, but Yuuji is at B2 where he encounters the locust curse. Okay. And then he goes down to there. Okay. This episode's so creepy. The locust curse looks a lot like Cell, which is, I'm sure, by design. But it just sitting there eating the human. Oh my god. So, we established that we don't think that the locust curse was a transfigured human. They were originally just a curse. And they were put in charge of the veil, right? Of the little spike. Now, I would hope that Yuuji and them destroyed that spike as soon as he got done getting the locust out of the way. I would assume that he would destroy it, but I don't remember if they actually do that or not. And he's like, the patch face curse is here, right? And he's like, the patch face? Oh, you know. What's so fascinating about this entire scene is Yuuji, like, communicating with the curses. And I don't know if it's because he has Sukuna inside of him, so he has a curse already embedded within him, so it makes him more curse-like, right? But it's almost like the curses, and this kind of goes back to Choso from season 1, him interacting with the curses and talking to them, and them just having a conversation. It seems like it's very unique to Yuuji. Like, I know Gojo does it with Jogo at the end of this episode, and he communicates with the curses, but the fact that Yuuji just has this open conversation with this curse, like it's just an everyday chat, I think says something for his character and for the fact that he possibly, as, part of a curse inside of him with Sukuna. So I find that interesting, right? And he just has that, he almost like empathizes a little bit with the curse, but then he's like, look, you've ate a lot of people and that's bad. I like that he eventually says, he's like, yeah, you're a curse. I'm sorry you're like this. He prays over him at the end, which Yuuji praying over the curse at the end reminds me a lot of Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. They both Tanjiro and Yuuji, without spoiling Demon Slayer, have this like similar innocent, mature, progressive, like male protagonist vibe that I love. I remember when Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen came out around the same time, and I was like, this is what shonen protagonists should be like. You mean, what? A male protagonist is in touch with his feelings, badass, and also sympathetic and compassionate? What? Can we have more of these, please? Yeah, I was like, yes, please. So I like that Yuuji prays over the curse at the end after he defeats him. And it's almost like he sympathizes with the curse a little bit, but then he's like, you've killed a lot of people. You're a threat. I'm sorry, but I've got to take you out to help save the others. So sorry about it, man. Sorry about you. But yeah, those nails are back, securing the veil in place. And so the curse here talks about the humans that Mahito transfigures lose their flavor. I'm clever, I can tell the difference. So he was not a transfigured curse. He was just already placed there. And then, man, Yuuji punching him saying, you've got to stop underestimating humans. I love that. I love that idea of Yuuji talking about don't underestimate humans. Which the irony of all irony is that Mahito is a curse born of humans. So it's like born of their negativity. So it's like, no, you should not underestimate humans because they can create quite a monster. Literally, right? But I just love the idea because we've had the idea of Geto wanting to destroy all non-sorcerer humans, and you have Gojo who's been protecting them, and then Yuuji's talking about just don't underestimate humans in general, whether it's sorcerers, whether it's non-sorcerers. He doesn't say don't underestimate Jujutsu sorcerers. He says don't underestimate humans, which can be encompassing all of the different, realms of humanity, right? And he's like, do you know what kind of curse I am? And then Yuuji's like, a grasshopper? And he's like, you got it! I was like, there's a very Spirited Away kind of Ghibli vibe to the locust curse that's hard to nail down, but it's there. It's very weird. And they talk about a large-scale disaster arising from an outbreak of locusts. They consume everything: paper, clothes, building, anything made from plant fibers. And they're required to eat its own weight in food every day to grow. Which there's a weird similarity to Mahito in this case, where it's like the idea of getting bigger and growing, and you have to consume everything around you in order to keep developing. It's very, very creepy. And yeah, and it leaves behind this black fluid that secretes. Mankind has a long feared hatred and cursed such demonic pests. Mm-hmm. And then just the two of them fighting. And the animation is really good in this scene, but my God, Yuuji, just sitting there just punching the daylights out of this locust like it's nothing. Like he's just been sitting there practicing his punches, for however long it's taken. It's crazy to see the growth on our boy Yuuji. And I feel like in the manga, this fight, and in the anime here, this fight is just to get us back to Yuuji action, just getting us back in action with his character, saying, hey, it's been a while. We've had this flashback with Gojo and Geto. What's Yuuji been up to? How has he been growing this past time? You know, how is he developing as a fighter? And this battle is like meant to prove just that, right? Although, even though he did well against the Locust Curse, and it was a battle of bronze, Mahito is a whole different other story. So I don't know how to feel about that. I feel like Mahito is still gonna be like gonna give him a hard time. But yeah, he just ends up wrecking the Locust spirit, which is fine. He says, I'm clever. And I just love them back to back with one another. But the thing about it is, Yuuji at no point, Yuuji never like looks at the curse and is like, you damn dirty curse, or you're just, you gutter slut, you damn dirty curse. Like, he never treats him like inferior necessarily, but he treats them as a serious threat, which I think, again, speaks volumes for Yuuji's character of how serious he takes his opponents. But he never like curses the cursed spirit or says it's like demeans it or acts like it's inferior to him. He treats it with the utmost respect, which says a lot for Yuuji's character, right? So meanwhile, the curse is talking about him being superior to humans, and yet he can't lay a jab on Yuuji. And that shot of Yuuji with like the curse energy coming out of his fists and him being like enveloped in the darkness, it looks like Sukuna, but you know it's not. So it's fantastic. And then he goes up to him and dodges it. And he's like, I'm the more clevered one. And he dodges everything. And that's when he snaps the tail. And he says he did have a trick. But more importantly, and Yuuji says, you've eaten people. You're prepared for what that means, right? There was no gap in their strength and no trick that could overcome it. So yeah, Yuuji is saying that by attacking humans, you know the risk and you know the consequence. That's what I like. I like the idea that Yuuji is like, if you were just a cursed spirit that hadn't attacked any humans, that would be a different story, which we're going to talk about in a minute. He's like, if you were just a cursed human that didn't attack humans or hadn't killed any, we would have a different story here. But you've killed humans. So by killing humans, you understand the consequences of your actions, that you are likely to be killed as well, right? Which we'll talk about that with Choso. But I was like, okay, Yuuji is justifying saying, this is why you have to go, because you killed humans and you're a threat to humanity. I'm sorry, but your time on the island is over, right? And then he grabs the egg and everything so that he can't regenerate himself. And then, yes, okay, so he did break the nail. All right, so he broke the nail. Good deal. We got that confirmed. Yay. Then we have this giant-ass axe. It's got some kind of like, looks like a heart design, like a living, breathing heart on it. And Mei Mei is just like holding it over her shoulder. I tell y'all, if I go cosplay, if I wanted to go all out for a Jujutsu Kaisen cosplay, I would be Mei Mei with the big-ass battle axe. Hell yes. Absolutely. I would totally do that. And then Yui is like, here's my sis. What I was going to say in the reaction is, I haven't been able to ship Nanami with anybody because I know a lot of people ship Gojo and Nanami. I get it. I see it. I personally, I'm such a Gojo and Geto shipper that I can't will myself to ship him and Nanami, and just maybe I'll get there. We'll see. I like them as friends, but maybe we'll get there. We'll see. But you know what? We haven't seen Mei Mei and Nanami interact at all. We haven't seen that. They both have like blades that are wrapped up in cloths. They both have like bleach blonde or platinum white blonde hair. They both seem serious. Nanami's a salary man. She's a working independent lady making her monies. Why not get them together? Why not? I need Nanami and Mei Mei to interact now. I need this to be my crack pairing. I don't know, though. Mei Mei, I don't know if Nanami... I love Nanami to pieces, but I don't know if he's extreme enough. She's a bit cray. I don't know if he's extreme enough for her. She would definitely, like, be the crazy one in the relationship. I'm rooting for it. We'll see. And they're like, let's wait on Itadori and then descend to B5. And okay, so he was praying for the man that was eaten, not just the curse. Okay. Again, showing Yuuji being that devoted person. And God, the cut from Yuuji praying for the person to Mahito looking like he's in prayer. That cut, that parallel, I was like, show, Mappa, yes, you know what you're doing. I just imagine that one page has Yuuji, you flip the page, and it's Mahito on the next page. It's just how I imagine it. I'm like, yes, please, give me all these things. And then Mahito being like, well, I wish I could have battled Itadori-kun. That would have been great. But, and he's on level B5 at Meiji Shrine. Yep. Go guy was exercised, huh? Well, darn, that means a skilled sorcerer's here. What a shame. I wanted to fight them too. But I can't, huh? I've got a job to do. And we see the train. If he's like transfigured all these people in the train and they're all gonna like be let loose on Yuuji the moment that they come down there. Oh my God, what if he transfigured like a bunch of these people and like the doors are gonna open like zombie apocalypse style when Mei Mei and Yuuji get down there? That would be terrifying. I'm a little bit worried with Mei Mei and Yui going down there. I'm worried for Yui because he doesn't seem to have any defense on him against Mahito. I'm worried Mahito would transfigure him. I'm worried for Mei Mei. Unless Yui could turn into like a bird or something. That'd be kind of funny if he could transform himself. Don't know. But yeah, and so then where are they at? They're at B4. Okay, and she's like, impressive. I just love Yui carrying the battle axe. It's great. And she's like, I thought you'd struggle more. And he's like, no, that's because I wasn't up against Mahito. So they're on their way. She says, you're practically at first grade already. I haven't seen anyone get this far without a technique since Kusakabe. So we get confirmation that Kusakabe does not have a technique. Okay. Which is interesting. He's with Panda. Okay. So we get that. It's weird because there's a lot of Jujutsu sorcerers that have handicaps in this series. You have Muda, you have Toji, you have Maki, you have Kusakabe, you have Panda, you have Yuuji. They all have some kind of limitation. And then you have Megumi and Gojo that are just like, prodigies, go. You have Inumaki as a limitation. It's like everybody except for Megumi, Yuta, and Gojo have some kind of crazy limitation in some way, shape, or form. But those three are like, they are free-for-alls. So it's so strange. But yeah. And then he's like, it wasn't Patchface. If I had been fighting him, it wouldn't have gone so easily. And then I love Yui. Yui comes up and he's like, my sister's complimenting you. Praise her. It's like, I'm honored. I love it. It's great. And then they go downstairs like they're going, Mei Mei just has to be cool and slide down the stairs. And then they go to floor 5 and they're too late. And then he goes up to the woman that's freaking out. Where are the others? So we don't get to see how she's reacting. We don't get to see her reaction, right? They get down to the 5th floor, the basement where Mahito is supposed to be with the hostages, and they're all gone. Or are they all on the train? But we don't know what's going on. I'm wondering if the woman is going to lure Yuuji and Mei Mei and Yui onto the train to get them away from Gojo, or if Mahito is just going to lure Yuuji onto the train and take off with just Yuuji, and Mei Mei and Yui get left behind. I'd feel better for Mei Mei and Yui if that was the case. But I'd be very curious if Yuuji is getting lured onto the train with Mahito, and it's just for Mahito to keep Yuuji distracted while the stuff with Gojo goes down. That's what I'm thinking. And plus, if you had Yuuji trapped on the train, then whenever they get done with Gojo, presumably, then they could go after Yuuji on the train. Maybe. And maybe that's something to do with the OP, like Toto comes in and he's like, best friendo will not be contained onto the subway. I don't know. But meanwhile, we go back to Gojo, who is getting trapped by Hanami onto platform 3. They're getting trapped on there. And he's like, well, damn it. Gojo's like, you guys don't have to do this. I'm not running away. If I ran, you guys would kill every human here, right? So I'm trapped here because you know how this goes. He's like, the whole reason I came here for you. It's like there. All right, we get Where's Waldo sitting there. We have Tuxedo Mask on there. We've got bunnies. We've got like a mohawk. We've got two people with things. He's like, what are those two talking about? Oh my God. Don't you mean four? So some people can see just two people. Some people can see four. Wait a minute. What are those two talking about? Don't you mean four? Wait. But, so, there are four down there, but the one guy says, don't you mean four? Like, you can see the curses and Gojo, who's a human. But the other guy's like, what are those two people talking about? Which would suggest that two of the four are human. So wasn't Choso a human that was fed a curse and like got merged with that curse, and that's what created Choso? Wasn't Choso like one of the humans that they kidnapped in the last season? It was fed one of like the fetuses, the cursed fetuses that was like half human, half curse, and then it like merged with that. That's what that is. So Choso is that. Okay, that's why. So we're seeing either Gojo and Choso or Jugo and Hanami as well. He's like, if you ran, the correct answer. Okay. This whole playground scene, I'm sorry, Gege. Do we have to get a restraining order? Do we have to like keep Geto and Mahito and Jogo and Hanami within like a 500 feet of any schoolyard? Why are we doing this? I get that it's like, I get that it's humor and levity. It was weird enough when it was just Geto and Jogo talking, but the moment that Mahito enters the picture, I was like, oh my God, what is happening? So I wanted to write down this conversation that Geto has. Here, do you understand when Gojo is able to utilize his power to the fullest? When he's alone. Yeah. So Geto, I want to put down everything that Geto notes. Things that he notes on Gojo. So he notes that Gojo is the strongest when he can go all out, and that is when he is alone. Think of Toji. When he's with Toji fighting him, he can go all out because he's by himself. He didn't go all out with the people in the Star Religious group because if he had in that moment, they would have died. So he does that, and then the other just in there. I like that Jogo just feels like he doesn't want to be there. He's just like, Also, the bubble blowing is a nice callback to the OP from season 1, only it was Mahito doing it. It's a little bit different now. And he says, well, it's when Gojo is by himself. The correct answer. And then that's when they bring all the people into the train station and they all start, it's like, whether you run or not. And so we see all these people in the station and they're all getting killed. And I like that there's people dressed up as Android 18 or Mortal Kombat players or Street Fighter, but it's like just changed enough so it's not copyright infringement. And Gojo's like, get back or you'll die. They sealed the exit to create a blind so that I wouldn't know if there are people on the other side or not. He's like, any Jujutsu sorcerer with him is just a hindrance. So we'll go one step lower and surround him with non-sorcerers. So again, Gojo works alone because he doesn't want to be held back by any sorcerers. And so Geto, or whoever's possessing Geto, is saying, well, we'll just go a step further and we'll put him not only with other sorcerers who are a liability, but with non-sorcerers who are even more of a liability, because at least the sorcerers he's with have a possibility of defending themselves, but the non-sorcerers won't have it at all. Now, again, he says non-sorcerers. Again, another telltale sign. It's so bizarre because the things that he knows about Gojo are things that Geto would know. But there are so many red flags that show this is not Geto. Like when he says non-sorcerers, he doesn't say monkeys. Like if it were Geto from Jujutsu Kaisen's movie, he would have said, oh, we'll go one step lower and surround him with the monkeys. But he doesn't say that. He says non-sorcerers, which is not Geto's lingo, right? As he blows the bubble. And Jogo's just like, okay, I guess. And then they have like the simple domain, the punching power, where he goes after him. And he just like lights people on fire. It's terrifying, right? And Hanami goes after the people too. And then here's the thing. Choso says blood manipulation, slicing exorcism. But Choso doesn't hurt anybody there. It goes past everyone, or right? It goes past everyone and aims straight for Gojo, and Gojo blocks it with Infinity, right? And he used it as a blind to get to where Jogo and Hanami could attack him. Like, they both look like, Jogo and Hanami look like Toto and Yuuji from last season when they were punching together and were doing like the Black Flash. So one thing about Choso I want to know is that Choso doesn't actively harm any of the people there, which is fascinating. Because Hanami, we don't see Hanami harm people, but we've seen him try to before. Choso does not. And I don't think Choso necessarily would harm anybody. I think Choso's just like, I'm here because I have to be. Mahito brought me into this. I don't know where else to go or what to do, so I'm just here. I don't know what you guys want to do with me. I would love to have Choso and Yuuji have a conversation, especially because Nobara and Yuuji were responsible for Choso's brothers dying. So I would love for Choso to have a conversation with Yuuji and be like, hey, you killed my brothers. What are we going to do about this? And then Yuji's like, well, you've killed people. And then Choso's like, well, I actually haven't. And then Yuji's like, oh, well, what do I do about that? Like, I want a conversation between Choso and Yuuji. I think it would be fascinating. I think of all the cursed spirits that we've seen so far, Choso is, I mean, in comparison to Geto and Mahito, like one of the most communicatively coherent and cursed spirits that we have. I mean, Jogo and Hanami have like an animalistic side to them a little bit, like a more simplistic side. Choso seems a little bit more elevated, so kind of like Mahito and Geto. So there's that. Right! But yeah, and then they both go after Gojo. And I like that just, what do they say there? He says the minimum output of his curse technique reversal is double that of his amplification. So, okay, again, things that Geto would know about Gojo, right? So it says the minimum output, which is that of the reversed technique, of technique reversal, is double the amplification. So basically, it's taking more for him to defend himself than it is for him to attack. It's causing him to output more energy, keeping himself going than it is attacking, right? And then again, all the little kids playing with the bubbles, it'll be impossible for him to use it without catching non-sorcerers in it too. So they're like, we're going to limit Gojo's power because he's not going to go all out because there's a chance that people will be caught up in it and get involved and be collateral. It's kind of like as he's blowing the bubbles, as Geto's blowing the bubbles and it's going around all the kids, he's like, if you spread out your technique, it's going to encompass more people within it. That's why we want all those people there so that they'll all be liabilities and it'll keep Gojo contained, right? He'll probably won't be able to charge his blue up. He won't be able to charge blue to an effective output either. So again, he knows about blue. He knows about red. Those are things that Geto all knew. So there is a part of me that wonders, like, Geto became a curse user during the movie, correct? But then he died, right? And so then he died. And then I'm wondering if there's like a parasitic host. If there's like a parasitic host that latched onto his corpse and like connected, if it connected to his brain and memories, but was its own entity. Because it seems to know things that Geto remembers. It seems to know things about Gojo. It seems to know things about Jujutsu Society. It knows things, but it's not Geto because of the language that it uses. It uses some distinct keywords that Geto wouldn't use. So it's not Geto, but it's like, is it a parasitic host that's like taken over his corpse and like connected to his brain and like just accessed his memories and things like that? Could be. Is it a curse that Geto formed a pact with? Like I've talked about in the last episodes? I don't know. At this point, I think it's like a parasitic curse, and it's either made a deal with Geto, or it's attached itself to Geto and is just feeding off of his memories. And it was not. The question is, was it consensual or non-consensual? That is the question. Was Geto on his deathbed, and then the curse like made a pact with him and took him over as a host, or did he die and the parasitic curse was just like nee, and just got in with Geto, and that's where he went? That is the question, right? But yeah, so they both go after Gojo to try to attack him, and they're like, it would prove difficult for him to use blue for high-speed movement as well. He'd be like a dump truck hitting non-sorcerers. But yeah, so then there's all these bubbles, and there's like Hanami leaping around with the bubbles there. There's this weird-ass like snail curse that could be a transfigured human. We don't know. And then there's Mahito leaping after the bubbles. What is this insanity, Gege? What are you doing? What is this farce? What is this madness? Like, why? But then they go after Gojo to attack him. And they strike the barrier around him, but they don't break through. They get close, and Gojo's like, no, I'm going to teleport out of here, bye. And that's the one thing. Gojo couldn't teleport whenever he knew Geto in high school at the Jujutsu Society. He wasn't able to teleport yet. He told Geto he was working on it, but he hadn't been able to do it yet. So, does the Geto that is now a curse or a curse user in the present know about the things that Gojo worked on, or is he only going off of the memories Geto had from the past? That is the question, right? Because he just zooms out of the way, and they're all like, what? And then he, like, pops up. He's like, it makes sense. You two would think of that after allying with curse users. So, he says curse users. He doesn't specifically say Geto, so... But here's the rub. Gojo, I feel like in Gojo's heart, he knows that it's a possessed Geto that's causing this, but every fiber of Gojo's being doesn't want to admit that, because that means admitting that something or someone is manipulating the course of like your dead best friend lover. And like, what tragedy is that? We don't want to think about that. So he's just saying, oh, curse users. Not my dead boyfriend. Nothing like that. We're fine. Everything's fine. Like, he doesn't want to admit that. So he just says, oh, it just could be curse users. And he says the domain amplification is the same principle as the new Shadow School's simple domain. So Gojo's on to them. He's like, they're trying to use a simple domain because they know it can attack me. Huh. Like, Gojo's not dumb. He's insanely smart. And he's figured it out, right? They can neutralize the technique that I use. That would allow their attacks to hit me, which is essentially it. And they're like, well, what do we do about the infinite void domain? And Geto's like, yeah, no, he probably won't use that because the only people not affected are, important to know, people he touches. So when he was holding Yuuji back during season 1, Yuuji wasn't affected by the void because he was holding Gojo. Makes sense. Also, that is like such a crazy caveat of the infinite void that Gojo, anyone he touches that he has physical contact with, isn't affected by the domain. So it's like only the people he trusts the most, only the people he's intimate with the most would be spared from it, is such an interesting take on his character. But the only thing that kind of complicates this parasitic feasting off of Geto's memories is the fact that Geto knows about the infinite void. But if Mekamaru was a mole, Mekamaru could have told them about Geto's domain expansion and explained what it does. So that's how they could have found out anyway, because they were using him for information. So it's very possible that... I just like the idea that you have Mahito using the power of touch. Anything Mahito touches can be destroyed. Anything Gojo touches can be saved. And anything that Geto touches, turning into the ball that he consumes, can be used. So there's lots of hands doing things, right? And so they do a little description saying, even if he does have the skill to trap you all in his domain, he would have to kill like a bunch of people. The non-sorcerers would get crushed in the expansion of the domain in the veil. There's a 99% chance he's not going to use it, but the 1% that Geto talks about, he's like, you guys can't use your domain expansions either, because if you provoke him and you start killing people, then Gojo's going to be like, well, you're killing people anyway, so I might as well activate mine and destroy you. So Geto's saying, don't activate your domain expansions. Don't do that. That will be a big no-no, and it will cause Gojo to activate his, and then we'll lose. So don't do that. The question is, what are they doing? They're not wearing him down. We established that Limitless isn't wore out anymore. So why are they distracting him? He talks about the prison realm. He says the prison realm there. He's like, he's going to give up and use his too. And what does he say? He says, you're not going to win that tug of war against him in his domain. You just need him to focus. So, focus on defeating the cursed spirits and rescuing the non-sorcerers. So, distract him. Distract him from thinking about anything except rescuing people and saving the non-sorcerers. And yeah, Jogo kills the one guy with the afro that looked like a movie theater attendant. And Choso did not kill anybody. Hanami hasn't either in this one, but Jogo did. He said, I'm shocked. He's like, are you making excuses? Not at all, Baldy. And then at this point, Gojo establishes why he could possibly waylay everybody. the shot of him with the blindfold down and the glowing eyes that he's like, look, I've been doing this the whole time, bitches. Excuse me, what? I feel like that look by Gojo is a, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. We'll do exactly what you say, sir. He says, I'm shocked you ever thought you could beat me if this is all you've got. Yeah. And then that's, what does he say there? We had one more thing before the end that Geto was saying. And Jogo's like, okay, we're distracting him. He says, you need to distract him for 20 minutes. Hold out for 20 minutes. After that, it's time for me and the prison realm. So, Geto needs 20 minutes to get the prison realm together. Why? Why 20 minutes? Why you can't immediately do it? Apparently, there's some kind of spell or some kind of incantation or some kind of ritual that has to be performed that takes about 20 minutes to do. And he needs them to just distract Gojo and keep him focused long enough for him to, like, get it in motion. Which explains now why there's the timer on Gojo arriving to when it's going to activate. Awesome! What did he arrive? He arrived at like 10:21, right? Or 10:31, right? He arrived at 20:31. He arrived at something 31, right? And this has been 10 minutes. So, or maybe it's 30 minutes for it to work and they need to distract him for 20 of it. I don't know. But there's already been a significant amount of time passing. So, nope. Not good, Cotton. Not good. I don't know what this prison realm is. I don't like it. I'm not a fan. Personally not a fan. I'm very curious how in the world this is going to go down. If it's like, if the prison realm is a simple domain that's been turned into a relic, if it's a curse that imitates a simple domain, I was going back to the discussion. It was talking about that they'd encountered simple domains before, but they hadn't seen them work in action. And Muda using his was like when they saw it in action. So, I don't know. I'm very curious to see what we're going to get next episode. We only got Yuuji, Mei Mei, and Yui, and then this incident with Gojo. But I am so fascinated by how all the paths are going to converge. If they do trap Gojo, then all hell breaks loose. Then what do we do? So, Gege has lulled us into this false sense of security by having all these funny things happen in the midst of all this madness. And I'm like, I'm just waiting for the rug to get pulled out from under me, and I'm not prepared for that. So, while I'm going to sit around not being prepared for that, I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. Please, no manga spoilers, no hints or clues. We'll just talk about this episode specifically, and anything before that I may have forgotten that would be important to realize. But in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm back next week with episode 9 of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2.